a Friday night. Every seat in the building is taken. The line at the concession stand wraps around the corner. The projection booth is humming. The car park outside is full. By any measure, this looks like a business at its absolute peak. And the owner might still lose money this month. That is not a hypothetical designed to shock you. It is the lived reality of thousands of cinema operators around the world, and the reason it happens tells you something genuinely strange and important about how money actually moves through an industry most people assume is straightforward. You buy a ticket, you watch a film, the theater makes a profit. The logic seems airtight. It is not. Not even close. Before we get into numbers, we need to be clear about what kind of business a movie theater actually is, because it is not one thing. The word cinema covers a range of operations with dramatically different financial lives. At one end, you have the independent single-screen theater. These are often old buildings, sometimes cultural landmarks, operating in leased spaces in smaller towns or city neighborhoods. The ownership structure is usually simple, one person or a small family, and the upfront cost to get started, particularly if you are converting an existing space rather than building from scratch, can begin below $1 million. The trade-off is that these theaters have almost no bargaining power. They take whatever licensing terms the film distributors offer them, and they cannot buy supplies in bulk at any meaningful discount. Then you have small local multiplexes with 2 to 5 screens, serving regional communities or secondary cities. These require more capital, typically somewhere between $500,000 and $1.5 million, but they can spread their operating costs across more screens and offer audiences a choice of what to see, which matters for foot traffic. Large chain cinemas, the ones you see in shopping centers with 12 or 14 screens and a lobby the size of an airport terminal, are a different business altogether. These operators negotiate at scale. They can get supply deals, favorable lease terms, and their size gives them leverage with film distributors in a way that a single-screen independent simply cannot access. Their startup costs run into the millions. Then there are luxury theaters, which have quietly become one of the more interesting bets in the industry. These venues strip out the standard rows of fixed seats and replace them with wide, motorized reclining chairs, often paired with full food and alcohol service delivered directly to your seat. They deliberately reduce how many people fit in each auditorium. And, counterintuitively, they often make more money per showing than a packed traditional cinema. Finally, premium large format screens. The IMAX experience being the most famous operate under a specific kind of partnership. The IMAX Corporation does not own or run most IMAX theaters. Instead, it licenses its projection and sound technology to cinema operators, takes an upfront fee, and then collects a percentage of every ticket sold on that screen for the life of the agreement. The theater gets a premium product that commands a higher ticket price. IMAX gets a recurring revenue stream without bearing the cost of building anything. Understanding these differences matters because the economics are not the same across the board. What is true for a 12-screen multiplex in a metropolitan shopping mall is not true for a converted art house theater in a mid-sized regional city. They share a name, but not a financial reality. Here is the first moment where the dream and the reality diverge. People who want to open a movie theater often think about the experience, the smell of popcorn, the darkened auditorium, the shared thrill of a crowd watching something together. They think about movies. They do not think about HVAC systems. A modern 10-screen multiplex in a major city will cost, from the ground up, somewhere between $15 million and $25 million. That figure is not exaggerated. Construction alone for a multi-screen cinema can cost between $4 million and $15 million before you have installed a single projector. If the building is in a premium urban location, land acquisition adds another $1 to $5 million on top. The equipment costs are their own category of pain. A single digital cinema projector, the baseline standard, not a high-end laser unit, runs between $30,000 and $50,000 per screen. A modern 4K laser projector, which is increasingly the competitive minimum for a venue that wants to attract audiences away from home screens, costs upward of $80,000 per unit. Then comes the sound system. A standard surround sound setup runs between $20,000 and $50,000 per auditorium. An upgrade to Dolby Atmos, which is the immersive sound format that many blockbusters are now mixed specifically to exploit, adds another 30 to 50% on top of that cost. Seating is another shock. A standard cinema chair is not expensive, but a motorized leather recliner, the kind that distinguishes a luxury theater from a standard one, costs between $800 and $1,500 per seat. Outfit an auditorium of 80 recliners and you have spent between $64,000 and $120,000 on chairs alone, for one room before the projector, screen sound system, or air conditioning. Joe Masher, the CEO of Bowtie Cinemas, told IndieWire that two of his multiplex's 14 screens sat dark for an extended period because each had a broken projector requiring $40,000 in parts to fix, and attendance at the time did not justify the repair. That is what running a cinema looks like in practice. Not the glamour of the premiere, but the decision about whether a projector repair makes financial sense this quarter. The working capital requirement, meaning the cash a business needs to survive in the months between opening and becoming consistently profitable, adds another layer. Rent still has to be paid during slow weeks. Payroll happens every fortnight, regardless of whether the current film slate is drawing crowds. Industry models suggest a cinema needs between $500,000 and $2.5 million in working capital reserves just to handle the gap between launch and stability. Experienced real estate investors say that for retail businesses, the three most important factors are location, location, and location. For cinemas, the principle holds, but the specifics are complicated. A cinema in a downtown high-density area benefits from foot traffic and public transport access. It does not need to provide parking, which saves money on construction, but it pays for that privilege. Commercial lease rates in dense city centers run anywhere from $35 to $60 per square foot annually, and many leases include annual escalation clauses that push the rent up by around 10% per year, regardless of whether the cinema's revenue grew to match it. A cinema anchored inside a shopping mall gets steady foot traffic from retail customers who are already in the building and may decide on impulse to see a film. Mall leases are generally cheaper than standalone downtown locations, typically $21 to $26 per square foot, and the parking infrastructure is shared, which means the cinema does not bear that cost. The trade-off is that the mall operators' fortunes affect the cinemas. A struggling mall with empty anchor stores has less foot traffic for everyone inside it. Suburban locations offer lower real estate costs, sometimes as low as $13 to $18 per square foot, but they depend almost entirely on car access, require large parking areas, and tend to spike on weekends while sitting near empty on weekday mornings. The cinema has to staff and heat the building regardless. Small-town locations present their own paradox. Lease costs can be genuinely low, $5 to $12 per square foot, but the audience is limited, price sensitivity is high, and there is essentially no buffer if a film season underperforms. In a small town, a bad film year is not an inconvenience, it can be existential. Now we reach the part of this story that surprises almost everyone. When you pay $12 for a cinema ticket, the theater does not keep $12. In fact, in the opening weeks of a major release, the theater may keep less than $5 of that $12. Sometimes less. Here is how the system works. Movie theaters do not own the films they show. They rent them. The company that handles this is called a film distributor, often a division of the same studio that made the movie. The distributor and the theater negotiate a licensing contract for each film, and that contract specifies what percentage of every ticket sold goes back to the distributor. For standard releases in the middle of their run, the split averages roughly 50 to 55% to the distributor, leaving the theater with 45 to 50% of each ticket. That is the baseline for major blockbusters in their first week. The opening weekend of a Marvel film, a Star Wars release, a major franchise sequel, the distributor's share climbs significantly. Studios know that the biggest attendance will come in the first 7 to 14 days, when the cultural conversation is loudest. They price that leverage accordingly. In the first week of a major release, the studio's share of each ticket can reach 60 to 65%, leaving the theater with 35 to 40 cents of every dollar spent at the box office. There is a further complication. Blockbuster licensing contracts often include what industry people call floor requirements. The theater is contractually obligated to keep the film showing on its largest screen for a minimum of 3 to 4 consecutive weeks, regardless of how attendance is tracking by week 2. If the film opens to massive numbers and then drops sharply, which happens regularly, the theater is still committed to running it on premium real estate that could have been allocated to something with a better revenue split. The net effect is this. The films that generate the longest line are often the films generating the thinnest margins per ticket for the theater. The blockbuster brings the crowd. The crowd is then the product being sold to the concession stand. A cinema owner once told an interviewer, and many cinema owners have said some version of this over the decades, that he was not in the movie business. He was in the popcorn business. The movies were there to bring him customers. This is not a figure of speech. It is the actual financial structure of the industry. The gross margin on a large bucket of popcorn is extraordinary by any standard. The raw ingredients, corn kernels, coconut oil, flavoring, and the paper tub cost somewhere between 30 and 45 cents to produce. The bucket retails for $8.50 to $9.50 at most major cinemas. The markup is more than 1,200%. The gross profit margin on that single transaction exceeds 90%. A large fountain drink costs the theater less than 35 cents to produce. Carbonated water, flavored syrup, a cup, a lid, and a straw. It sells for $6 to $7. The margin is comparable to popcorn. Academic research on exhibition economics has found that concessions account for roughly 20% of a theater's total gross revenue, but represent between 40 and 85% of its total operating profit. Every dollar from concessions stays entirely with the theater. There is no distributor taking a share. There is no sliding scale licensing agreement. A $9 tub of popcorn is, in the language of finance, a clean transaction. The architecture of the cinema lobby is not accidental. The concession stand is placed between the entrance and the auditoriums. The display cases are illuminated. The menu boards are positioned at eye level, with smell as the primary marketing tool. Combo deals, the large popcorn paired with 2 large drinks, are priced not primarily to offer customers savings, but to increase the total size of each transaction. The perceived value is real, but the pricing is carefully constructed to maximize how much cash each patron leaves on the counter. Approximately 70% of moviegoers make a purchase at the concession stand. For a cinema operator, that number is everything. It is what determines whether a given showing was actually profitable. In recent years, the smarter end of the cinema industry has made a counterintuitive bet. They have been removing seats. A standard auditorium fitted with traditional fixed chairs might hold 200 people. Convert that same room to motorized recliners, and you might fit 80. You have eliminated 60% of your seating capacity. By conventional retail logic, you have cut your maximum revenue per showing by 60%, except that is not what happens. The luxury seat commands a ticket premium. Where a standard seat might sell for $12, a recliner seat is priced at $15 to $20. The auditorium that used to seat 200 and charged $12 per ticket had a maximum theoretical revenue of $2,400 per showing if sold out. The converted auditorium seats 80 people at $18 per ticket, a theoretical maximum of $1,440. But, and this is the critical variable, the converted auditorium fills more consistently. Research on luxury cinema conversions has found that the renovation can increase average attendance by 40 to 80% compared to the pre-conversion baseline. An 80-seat recliner auditorium running at 80% occupancy, 64 seats, earns more per showing than a 200-seat traditional room running at 30% occupancy, 60 people. And the recliner patron, who has already paid a premium to be there, tends to spend more at the concession stand. The industry overall has reported that well-executed recliner conversions increase total revenue per showing by 20 to 30% even after accounting for the seat reduction. The logic that more seats equal more money turns out to be wrong once you account for the relationship between comfort, occupancy rates, and per patron spending. Revenue is only half the equation. The other half is the monthly weight of what it costs to stay open, regardless of whether anyone shows up. The electricity bill is the first surprise. A multi-screen cinema is an enormous consumer of energy. The air conditioning alone, required to manage the thermal load of hundreds of people in sealed, darkened rooms, accounts for 45 to 55% of the total electrical consumption of the building. The United States Department of Energy data places movie theaters among the highest energy intensity commercial buildings in the country, with a median consumption of 112,000 BTU per square foot per year. For a large multiplex, that translates to monthly electricity costs in the tens of thousands of dollars, 12 months of the year, slow weeks included. Staffing is the other major variable cost. A cinema requires multiple overlapping workforces: ticketing staff, concession workers, ushers, cleaning crews who turn around each auditorium between showings, projection technicians who manage the digital servers and ensure the technical playback is correct, and management across all of these functions. Because cinema attendance is highly clustered. Friday and Saturday evenings are packed, Tuesday mornings are not. Scheduling labor efficiently is a genuine operational challenge. Overstaffing during slow periods erodes margins. Understaffing during peak periods damages the customer experience and reduces concession revenue. Lease payments are fixed. Whether the cinema sells out every showing for the month or runs at 15% occupancy during a weak January, the landlord receives the agreed rent. For a cinema in a shopping mall paying $25 per square foot on 30,000 square feet of space, that is $750,000 per year, approximately $62,000 per month, going out the door before a single ticket is sold. Maintenance never stops. Projection equipment requires regular calibration, filter replacements, and technical servicing to meet the digital cinema playback standards that distributors require. Carpets in high-traffic areas, need regular deep cleaning and periodic replacement. Recliners, mechanical systems, cup holders, and seat controllers break down and require repair or replacement. A high-end motorized seat can cost up to $1,000 to replace when it fails. Commercial kitchen equipment for theaters offering food service has its own maintenance cycle. All of these costs, rent, utilities, payroll, maintenance, insurance, licensing fees, marketing, continue at roughly the same level whether the cinema is in the middle of a blockbuster summer or grinding through a slow February with minimal releases on screen. The cinema business runs on a deeply uneven calendar, and this is one of the structural vulnerabilities that outside observers consistently underestimate. The industry has two reliable peak periods. The summer corridor, roughly May through August, is when Hollywood concentrates its biggest releases, knowing that school holidays drive family attendance, and that the heat sends people indoors looking for 2 hours of air-conditioned entertainment. The second peak is the holiday season, mid-November through to New Year's, when studios release prestige films chasing awards attention alongside family blockbusters, targeting school break audiences. During these windows, a well-positioned cinema can run at 60 to 80% occupancy, concession sales are high, and the combination can generate enough operating surplus to sustain the business through the rest of the year. The shoulder seasons are brutal. January and February are historically the weakest months in the theatrical calendar. Studios use these months to dump films they have limited confidence in or hold back